have any attendees. Yeah, here we go. They're coming in. So welcome everybody. We're going to give it just a few more seconds while our attendees are still loading into the program before we get started. But we want to welcome you to this week's CybHER Conversation. Okay, seeing the numbers slow down here, so we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. My name is Katie Shuck and I am the Executive Outreach Director for CybHER at Dakota State University, and we are thrilled that you are joining us for another week of our CybHER Conversations program. This week we have Ellen Arens, who is a Program Manager for Raven Industries, and I am not going to say a whole lot about what she does since that is what we are all here to hear about, but I do want to just give some generic information first about CybHER. So if you are not familiar with CybHER, CybHER is a program out of Dakota State University founded by Drs. Ashley Podorotsky and Pam Rowland, who you can see on the screen as well. And we are an organization whose mission is to motivate, empower, and educate girls in cybersecurity. So really working to get more girls in cybersecurity and close the gender gap and help fill the workforce shortage that we're seeing within this arena. Now, these CybHER Conversations programs are meant for both boys and girls of any age, K through 12, students, parents, teachers. We are so happy that you are here to join with us today. If you do have any questions that you did not already submit in your registration, you can use the Q&A form to submit those, and we will be getting to those at the end of the program. But without further ado, I give you Ellen Arens.
Hi, thanks everybody for coming in, and I'm really honored to be selected to help talk to you and inspire you into careers in STEM. I'm going to take just a second here and I will upload a little bit of a presentation just to show a little bit of where I've been and hopefully answer some of the questions about how I got where I am now. So I'm a local South Dakota girl. I grew up in a small town of about 300 people. So on a farm near a small town. The idea is, I think, one of the best things about doing that and growing up in small town South Dakota was you get exposed to so much on a farm in a small town. You get to do everything from helping run the farm to fix cars to cook and do all sorts of things. You get a lot of sense of responsibility growing up in the Midwest, I think, and that has served me very well. Also got a ton of support from community and opportunities in my school system, both as I was growing up in elementary school through high school, and then the opportunities within the university system in South Dakota as well. So I'm really grateful for the resources that are available and the community organization and support of growing up in a place like this where you really reach out to people and there's a lot of people there with helping hands willing to push you and help you up the ladder as you go. So from small town South Dakota, I did go to SDSU for 2 years and then decided I wanted to try and bring my wings out a little bit more and flew a little bit farther. Maybe a little bit of it was naivety, but I thought when I was young that I wanted to be the next Wernher von Braun and go try and build the next rocket ships. So I decided that proximity might help with that, and I moved myself down to Florida and applied to school down there. Through just a lot of hard work and knowing what my values were and where my goals were in life, I could really prioritize what was important at the time. So I prioritized my schoolwork, I prioritized making the connections with the professors, making the right impression, showing that I could work hard, and all of that paid off. I got a summer internship working at Kennedy Space Center, and from there ended up in a co-op position that led me to a 13-year career at NASA. I had a ton of amazing and wonderful experiences there. Working in NASA for an ops center meant that we really got to be hands-on. So I've gotten to sit in the Space Shuttle Atlantis. I've gotten to be at the top of the launch towers and the fuel tanks at the launch pads and just be a part of a lot of really amazing things. I think a big key to being part of that is really comes from that background, farm background, small town background, Midwest attitude of not being afraid to take on anything. So if that meant I needed to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go into the middle of a swamp to take data on what a hydrogen fire looked like, or I was sitting on top of a roof at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Florida taking weather data in order to understand how that would affect the deflection of, of light coming through different windows that we were going to be using for different applications. A willingness to learn and a humbleness as well of being able to admit what you don't know, I think goes a long ways. The more you're willing to ask people to teach you, it just opens up the conversation. And as long as you're willing to learn and ask and be humble about what you know, people just pour that knowledge into you, and it really develops a strong sense of trust to help push you in the next direction and take the next step. From working at NASA, I had a great career. The shuttle program, as you guys probably know, has come to an end, and we're on to a different direction with the NASA and different private companies going into space exploration. So during that lull and transition time, things got a little bit quiet at Kennedy Space Center, and I wanted to take a different opportunity. As my family got older, I wanted to bring them back home, closer to their grandparents and the rest of their extended family. So I was really lucky to have the timing just work out just perfectly. So I was able to get I guess I skipped over something on what I was actually doing at Kennedy Space Center. So I'll back up a little bit. Things that I've done at Kennedy Space Center is launch support. So it was an operations center, which means that once the shuttle took off the ground, all of that control goes to Johnson Space Center and a different group of folks to take care of what happens once it's off the ground. But when that shuttle is on the ground, it's our responsibility at Kennedy to make sure that it's flight worthy to go up again. So we do the inspections, we take a look at the tiles, we look at the windows, we make sure that that vehicle we feel is safe again to go onto the launch pad and take a crew back into space. So part of what the work that I did was working with a team of folks that did everything from interesting projects like triangulation of birds at the launch pad during takeoff, so that if there was any sort of impact, we'd be able to evaluate the damage that might have been caused, to creating specialized tools to analyze micrometeorite impacts on the windows of the space shuttle. So you can imagine with a space vehicle, there's a lot of things that we want to measure. There's a lot of things that we want to make sure are safe. And those tools don't exist for normal vehicles. So I was part of a lab that got to create those tools and find those solutions to answer the questions and the problems that we have to make sure that we felt safe putting people back in that vehicle. Part of what goes along with there is not just the shuttle itself, but support of all of the infrastructure that you need in order to make a launch happen. So up in the corner, you can see I have something called non-destructive evaluation. So part of what that is taking a look at the tools and the pieces that we need to make a launch successful. And one of those was these huge cryogenic fuel tanks. And you can see up in the top corner, there's a really dark black spot on this particular tank. So we would do evaluation looking at the thermodynamics of the tank to find out if this was still structurally sound and we could continue to use this if we were creating a problem, and if there was a problem, what we could do to fix it. So one of the best parts of my job is this tank was in service for a long time, since the 60s at Kennedy Space Center, and it had always had a heat problem up at the top. And through the evaluation and looking at the thermodynamics of the system, we were trying to evaluate whether there was a leak in the tank and was actually causing air to solidify and cause ice on the inside, or if there was just missing insulation. And it was really neat that through the science, taking the thermal images, doing the evaluation of the thermodynamics of the system, we guessed that there was an insulation void and guessed at the size of that. And when the shuttle program finally came to an end, we opened up the tank, took a look, and sure enough, all of our calculations worked off. And even though I go to school all the time for engineering, science, and math, it still is really amazing when math works. It's magic that works, and it's fun when those pieces come together and all of that work that you've done, all the guessing, the data you've collected to justify your conclusions really pays off, and you can see that you were right, is still always magical. Then when the shuttle program came to an end, we started looking at how we could participate with other centers to do payload development for a launch to go to the moon. So what you see in the bottom is a test cart that we were developing to practice at actually this one I think was in Hilo, which is in Hawaii, the top of a mountain. So it's not the most beautiful part of Hawaii, but it was the closest we could get to a moonscape on the Earth. Testing a rover and a different science payloads to drill down into the lunar surface, extract a core of soil, do an analysis on the material coming out, heat it up, and see if we could verify that there was water there. So it was really neat to be part of that project. My role in that project got to be translator. So I got to work between the mechanical teams designing all of the hardware, the science teams doing the analysis and trying to determine what should be done and the process that we should take, and the electrical engineers and the mechanical engineers actually putting all of the pieces and the tools together to put it together. So having a background that allowed me to really speak all those different languages, even though we're all technical people, we have very different focuses, and making sure that we're all in alignment to get an end product that worked was really a fun aspect of that position. After working at Kennedy Space Center, I took that position. Like I mentioned, I wanted to come back home and be closer to my family, and I started working for Raven about 6.5 years ago. I came in doing software development initially, and then transitioned to working on the test team, and I'm currently program manager. So I feel really lucky working for Raven right now in Sioux Falls. It's a really interesting technology company in that we have 3 very diverse areas that are all very exciting. So we do everything from films development, which on the surface you don't really click on what that is, but that does environmental protection, creating films for reservoirs, for chemicals, for water reservoirs. It also does everything to, currently we've been helping make PPE for the hospitals fighting COVID, and also during hurricane seasons, we provide the tarps that go on a lot of roofs, unfortunately, when there's damage. Our Aerostar division also does balloons. We support the military, we support NASA, we support Google in anything that we want to do to bring technology into the sky. So it's kind of provides a gap filler between what you could do if you were going to launch an airplane or a drone, and you can only be up for a couple of hours to provide internet service or connections or communications to a satellite that is up there forever but is very expensive. The balloons fit nicely into this little gap that provide a few months of connection and communications between systems. And it's been a really neat project to see how we get to support all the different varied industries. The group that I'm currently part of right now is Applied Technologies, and that's really exciting right now in that we're providing technologies to further precision agriculture. So both for people that are driving in tractors right now, making sure that we're being good environmental stewards and not applying more chemicals than we need to, and only putting them where specifically we want them to. One of the other areas we're working at is going into autonomy. So I'm currently working as the program manager for autonomous machines. And you can see this machine up here in the corner, the little yellow one with the word DOT on it, is a fully autonomous machine with no cab. So this one will run around a field all on its own. And there's a lot of really fun technologies that we're developing there. And the safety aspects of making sure that we're doing this in a safe manner. We're detecting humans, we know when to stop. The security aspects that are going to go along with that as well is really exciting. New areas that we're pushing into beyond just trying to put product down on a field, but actually trying to figure out what it takes to replace a human in the field and do it where we feel secure enough to walk away from it. So there's so many aspects to my job. Like I said, I think the strongest aspects that have really made me successful is continuing to remain to be humble, ask questions constantly. People are so willing to share with you when you're willing to come in and truly listen. And I think that's been key to my career. I don't want to talk forever. I've talked really quickly, glanced at a lot of things. So I'd like to go ahead and just open it back up to the questions at this time to answer any specific questions about my past or how I got here.
Good. And we're going to let Kanthi ask you some questions that were submitted in the registration.
Okay.
That was quite impressive, Ellen.
Thank you.
We have a few questions from students or the participants. So the first one that they want to know is, what or who inspired you to become a scientist and mathematician?
I had an amazing math professor, teacher when I was in high school, who was really encouraging and always asked me why I wasn't pursuing things. So just that extra push to continue to make sure that I could try and excel was really great. But I think beyond math and science, I really have to thank my dad. He was one of those guys that would do anything once, always to make sure that you knew how to do it. And I think that was really key, whether it was building a house, fixing a tractor, canning foods. You do anything at least once and not be afraid to fail. So I think that was a really key inspiration for me choosing my path as well. There's falling down and failing is one of the best ways to learn. So not being afraid of that was key.
That's a beautiful statement. We're going to have to write that down somewhere. Another question is anything you worked on in space now?
Well, like I said, we have helped with the space shuttle processing. So things that I've done have gone into space before, but unfortunately we're not flying those anymore. That last piece that I talked about with the rover, I left Kennedy Space Center before that project was complete, but the science payload that's going into that is still in the process of getting developed into a project that will go to the moon someday. So we're waiting for a ride. There's a lot of pieces with the government work that is interesting. You get some amazing opportunities, but you also have to be patient because there's a lot of pieces that need to come together. That particular project was really fun because we were working internationally. We were working the science project. Canada was working the drill. I believe Japan was providing the rover, and the European Space Agency was providing the orbiter. So there were a lot of moving pieces and parts to bring together to make that project successful. Part of research and academia is also making sure that you keep trying, because your science and what you've put together may be a really great plan, but there's a lot of people that are going out there and competing to make sure that you get on rockets, to make sure you get your science payload selected. And just because you don't succeed the first time doesn't mean that that isn't a great idea. Try again, reinvent, collaborate some more, and those things that you work on can evolve and still make it, even if they don't make it from the first generation. They will evolve with all the connections and what you learn into a project someday to make it.
Fingers crossed then.
Yeah.
What do you find most interesting about the projects that you work on?
Constantly learning. If I have to be in a job where I'm going to be doing the same thing for 5 or 6 years, I'm going to get bored. So I love the challenges that I get. And one of the things that the CEO for Ravenworks says that I constantly really hold on to with my work is, the curious and the willing will always have a place. So as long as you're willing to ask questions and you're willing to put the hard work in, you're going to find a place to fit because you are of value. So I think Raven really embraces that as well. So I feel really lucky working for them, but any really good company is going to embrace those values as well. The value of people who are willing to ask the questions and take whatever they're doing to the next step is, they're invaluable to any industry, really. So that's been the best part and what makes me successful, I think.
I love that. Have you worked with the physics that's involved with wind turbines or anything similar?
I haven't worked with wind turbines. We did, when I was at Kennedy Space Center, work with solar panels. Part of one of the research projects we were doing is, if you take anything to Mars, it's a very, very dusty place. So solar panels, all of those equipment that you rely on, every once in a while, you would hear stories when Spirit and Opportunity were up there that their power was going down, and they were in danger of not being operational anymore. And luckily, every once in a while, a nice little windstorm would come by and clean off the solar panels, and they'd get a little boost to continue again for a while. So one of the projects that I worked on was looking at ways to non-mechanically help remove dust and stuff like that from spacesuits, solar panels, anything that connected on Mars missions. So that was a really neat project, and it's still ongoing today and getting incorporated in plans when we do finally take humans to the next place, the moon or Mars or beyond.
That's exciting. We have a few more questions. What was your work at NASA more hands-on, or was it more based on research?
I would say that being an operational center, my work was very hands-on. There are definitely different avenues you could take and different areas to go into. Different NASA centers do a lot more applied research. I would say JPL is a very hands-on center, and Kennedy Space Center is a very hands-on center. So I got a lot of contact with the pieces, the parts, the infrastructure of the whole system to support launch that I actually got to go out, touch, be a part of, and I truly enjoy that.
Was it hard to work in a mainly male-dominated field? We're all waiting for your answer on that.
It is interesting. I will say that I have never felt excluded in the relationships that I've had with the guys that I work with. When I was working at Kennedy Space Center, the government was very proactive about making sure that we had a very diverse workforce. So I didn't really feel it there. I do certainly feel it at Raven right now. I work in agriculture and engineering, so it's kind of a double whammy that of the probably 65, probably closer to 85 engineers that we work with, I only work with 2 women on a regular basis. So 2 out of 85 is kind of daunting numbers, but I've always felt really welcomed. And I think, especially with the attitude coming in of that humbleness that I talked about in the first place, and that willingness to try and learn, anybody who might have questioned what I was doing there in the first place quickly got over that. As long as you can show your skill, anybody else that's worth working with is going to see past whether or not you're a woman or not. I do kind of miss women every once in a while. We do have a different way of looking at things. So it would be nice to have a few more girls, and I have been very impressed with what I've seen over the past few years. I think the first 2 years that I worked at at Raven, we have an internship program, and maybe 1 out of 20 to 25 students would be a female. This year, our internship program is smaller just because of the issues that we've had with COVID and things going on. But of the 20 total interns that we have, I believe 6 of them are women. So we're still not taking over, but it's been certainly an increase, and I love seeing more female faces around. I'm very hopeful that's going to continue an upward trend.
So you think the landscape is changing for the better?
I do. And I hope that as we're seeing more female faces around, it just reinforces that we can be here. So it becomes easier. The more you see around you that the other people have done this, it just reinforces that you can do it too. Just makes that next step just a little bit easier. But I do see an upward trend in women in technology.
So Dr. Podrotsky, she has a statement, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So I think what you just said kind of resonates with that sentiment.
Absolutely.
Another question is, what was the process for you while you were joining NASA like?
The process for me was really smooth, and I have to tell a little bit of a story. It was really interesting in that I thought I needed to be near Kennedy Space Center in order to get a job there. And it was interesting, about 4 years into my job, I had a plane trip out to California with another coworker from Kennedy Space Center, and she said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "South Dakota." And I didn't go farther than that because nobody knows any small towns in South Dakota. And she goes, No, really, where in South Dakota are you from?" I'm like, "Well, Frederick." She's like, "Oh, I know that well." And I was completely astounded. I had no idea how we would have been connected or how the heck she would have known a small town in South Dakota. She actually grew up in the Philippines. She came to SDSU to go to school, started off veterinarian, and then changed into chemistry. And then she got an internship at Kennedy Space Center. So it was interesting that she came from the Philippines to South Dakota and ended up at Kennedy. And I went from South Dakota to down to Florida to try and end up at Kennedy. So I took for granted that I wouldn't be able to do it from South Dakota. And then she really opened my eyes that, you know, as long as you're interested, you're going to make it happen. You just keep asking the questions. And I actually forgot what your question to me was, but I thought that was an interesting loop there of making sure not to discount what you can achieve and where you can go because of where you're from. It can happen. You can find the ways.
What was the hardest challenge that you've overcome?
I love challenges, so it's hard to pick one as being hard because it's almost like the harder it is, the more determined I am that I'm going to find a way to make it happen. I think honestly for me, one of the harder challenges I've had is a struggle in trying to figure out what I want to do. I think women maybe suffer from this a little bit more of doing what you think has to be done, or where there's a gap, you want to go fill it. It's not necessarily what you want to do, and it's okay. And I'm working through that a little bit myself right now of saying, what do I actually want my career to be? Not just what does the company need me to do, but it's okay for me to think of myself first too sometimes and say, what do I really want to do? Not just what does somebody else need me to do. So I think that's not really a technical challenge or anything like that, but it's just a personal one that I think I've heard in common with a lot of women that maybe I don't hear from my male coworkers quite as much. Is it's okay to put yourself first sometimes too. You do develop a good team when you're one of those team players and are willing to take on the responsibilities of just nobody really wants to do this part of the job, but it's got to get done and I'm willing to put that in there. That's a great way of showing your value in a team. But also don't let yourself get relegated to the background by always doing the cleanup work. It's okay to step forward and speak up for yourself.
I love that. Speak up for yourself. So what were some major roadblocks that took place over the course of your career?
It seems like to me a little bit of the same question. Roadblocks to my career. I think at Kennedy and in the government, there's a little bit of a hesitation to don't rock the boat. So as long as things are good enough, let's just leave them that way. And I'm a rule follower until the rule doesn't make any sense anymore, and then I'm going to change that rule. So wanting to make sure that if just because we've been doing something a certain way for a long time and it seems like it's sufficient, if there's a better way, really questioning that and asking why we aren't changing and not being satisfied, well, that's just the way we've done it before. So I don't know if it's necessarily been a roadblock to my career, but I do know that's one of the areas that I've always had frustrations with in any of my settings that I've been in. The answer of, well, that's just the way we've always done it is never good enough for me.
Well, thank you so much for answering all our questions. I'm going to turn this over to Katie. She has something she would like to do.
Yes. So before we finish, we do want to say a big thank you to Ellen for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us and share your career and how you got there. I'm fascinated. I can't wait to see when we have tractors that drive themselves. So it's very good. We do have a poll for for our participants to answer. So I am going to launch the poll here. This is my first time doing this, so we'll see if it goes okay. But I think everybody should be seeing a poll on their screen, and if you can go ahead and fill that out, that would be great. And while we're at it, we are having a CybHER Conversation every Wednesday. So we are really excited for all that we have planned. We have people booked throughout the entire summer. We're getting ready to start booking for the fall. So please keep watching us on social media and on our website for who's coming up, and don't forget to register for those. Also, if you want to, I'm going to try to share my screen here again too, see if it does this. But we are going to, again, we have our website, www.cyber.org, as well as you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and our new online learning channel on YouTube. And then also, be sure to join us next week when we have Vicki Schumacher from iHeartRadio, who's a Vice President of Program and Project Management. And then on the 24th with the DSU alumni and now SBS Cybersecurity Information. She's an information security consultant and digital forensics analyst there at SBS. So we are thrilled to have them on there, and you can always go to our website to sign up and see the CybHER conversations there. I think we're still getting people answering the polls. I really appreciate those. But Ellen, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing everybody else in our future CybHER conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.